You ever wonder why these 8 guys are all staring at this dead guy? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Art History Fun with Dr. Brian. I'm Brian Zygmunt, professor of art history at Mount St. Mary's University, and today we're going to turn our attention to the Dutch Baroque, talk about Rembrandt, and one of his real bangers, the anatomy lesson of Dr. Tulp. My friends, hold my beer. It's Dr. Tulp time. While Italian Baroque artists were answering the strict visual decrees of the Council of Trent, which demanded emotionally charged altarpieces, weeping saints, and celestial ecstasy to rally the Catholic Counter-Reformation, the Dutch Republic took a radically different, unapologetically Protestant path. Having whitewashed their churches and rejected papal patronage, the Dutch weren't commissioning visions of the Virgin Mary. Instead, a newly minted merchant middle class created an open art market hungry for the terrestrial world. Expansive landscapes, finely detailed engravings, lively domestic genre paintings, and, I would say most famously, the ultimate badge of civic pride, the group portrait. Which brings us to the 26-year-old Rembrandt van Rijn in 1632. When the Amsterdam Guild of Surgeons commissioned him for their official portrait, they didn't want a boring static lineup of faces that looked like a yearbook photo. Instead, Rembrandt gave them the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp, a theatrical staging of the Guild's annual ticketed dissection of an executed thief. Instead of polite rows, Rembrandt organized the paying surgeons into a dynamic, leaning pyramid around the cadaver. Each doctor displays a distinct, intense reaction, ranging from profound scientific curiosity to the obvious, desperate attempt to keep their crisp, starched white ruffs far away from a dead man's arm. Dr. Tulp commands the room with effortless swagger, casually using forceps to demonstrate the mechanics of the flexor muscles on the cadaver's arms. Rembrandt even took creative liberties with staging this autopsy procedure. Dissections almost always began with the upper body, the torso, before the internal organs went all bonky. But opening the forearm first allowed Rembrandt to craft a dynamic composition that paid visual homage to an earlier portrait while keeping the foreground relatively polite for the Guild's dining hall. It is the entire dramatic toolkit of the Italian Baroque in this composition: intense chiaroscuro, sweeping diagonal lines, and high psychological drama, stripped of the Council of Trent's ecclesiastical mandates and applied entirely to empirical science and civic ego. No hovering angels, no papal bank accounts, just Dutch pragmatism, market capitalism, and a deceased pickpocket immortalizing 7 middle-class surgeons as titans of modern medicine. Now, to turn our attention to the painting, it's very easy to recognize Dr. Tulp. He's the guy wearing the hat performing the dissection, and he stands before a group of 7 doctors. The cadaver's feet are in the lower right of the composition, and his projection back into space creates a kind of diagonal line. At first, it might be easy to miss the open anatomical textbook in the lower right-hand corner of the composition, and one of the gentlemen is actually holding a drawing of the human body himself. Now, all of the men are wearing 17th century Dutch lace collars, which is a very common form of attire during the time frame, but their heads have all been arranged on slightly different planes. I have a running joke that there are some compositions where everyone is standing at the same level, and with a single swipe of a chainsaw, you could decapitate everyone. That is not the case here. Our eye is forced to bounce around this composition, and all these men have slightly different facial expressions, which makes this very much a composition on character and emotion and study. Rembrandt is so proud of this work that he has signed it in the middle part of the composition at the top, Rembrandt fecit, 1632, fecit is the Latin abbreviation for made this. In all, this is one of the real highlights of the Dutch Baroque periods and is a great example of a civically minded group portrait. Nobody paid for all of this. Everyone probably chipped in, and then it went into a civic space where it spoke to the civic importance of the group of people that they represent. And just as a personal note, when I began studying art history like a lifetime ago, as someone who was a physiology student, this painting really sang to me. And it wasn't until 2025 when I got to go see it in Holland. It is a wonderful painting. During the 17th century, there are drastically different things happening in Italy, a Catholic country, and the Netherlands, Holland, which was a Protestant one. And one of those ways it gets manifested is the ways in which art is done. Rather than having a lot of religious art, and there's some in Holland, not a lot, but there is some, the Dutch art market generally revolves around things like group portraits, like Dr. Tulp, genre paintings made famous by Jan Vermeer, engravings and etchings, and landscapes, and even things like still lives. There's no real market for these kinds of things in Italy. Italy wanted a Jesus or a saint of one ilk or another, and Rembrandt took advantage of a remarkably growing middle-class audience and found a way to give them the art that they found aspirational. Appreciate you sticking around. We'll see you next time.